It was supposed to be just another night where the rich dined and the invisible served. But in the glittering halls of the Royal Ember, beneath chandeliers worth more than a lifetime of wages, dignity was crushed under a polished shoe. Ava Miller, a young, hard-working black ashen waitress, was kicked and humiliated for a mistake so small it could be evaporated in seconds. But her quiet stand became louder than all the laughter around her. He was Daniel Carter, powerful, wealthy, and used to making others feel small. But as Ava didn't bow, didn't break, something shifted in the room, and someone else noticed. Ethan Rhodess, a silent observer and millionaire investor, witnessed the cruelty unfold. His silence wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of a storm. This night wasn't just about spilled wine. It was about dignity, justice, and the moment the tables turned on power. What happened next shook a city, destroyed an empire, and made Ava Miller the voice of those who've been silenced for too long. Comment if you believe respect should never be optional.
It was a night when power dined and dignity starved. The golden lights of the Royal Ember restaurant glowed over polished marble floors, where the wealthy laughed loud and waiters moved like shadows. But in that same hall of luxury, a voice trembled and broke the silence. "Please stop kicking me," whispered Ava Miller, a young black waitress struggling to keep her balance as pain shot through her leg. She had accidentally spilled a few drops of wine on a man's expensive shoe. That man was Daniel Carter, a powerful white CEO known for his cruelty disguised as charm. He smirked and pressed his shoe harder against her foot under the table, as if dominance was his dinner. Around them, people noticed but stayed quiet. Some looked away, some even laughed, but Ava's eyes didn't lower. There was fear, but behind it burned something stronger. She didn't shout. She didn't cry again. She simply said, "Sir, please let me do my job." That single sentence made Daniel grin wider. He called her useless. He mocked her accent. He told her people like her should stay invisible. The humiliation fell heavy and slow like poison in the air. But in that same moment, from across the room, someone else was watching. Ethan Rhodess, a quiet millionaire investor known for his calm nature, had seen it all. He put down his glass and studied Daniel with cold eyes. The room kept pretending nothing was wrong, but Ethan's mind didn't. He felt disgust rise in his chest. He didn't know Ava yet, but something about the way she stood, hurt yet proud, made him stay silent with purpose. He wasn't going to act yet. Not until he knew exactly who this girl was and why she worked here. Because sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is the start of justice planning its next move. As Ava limped away with her tray shaking in her hand, Daniel laughed loud enough for the world to know he thought he'd won. But he hadn't. The night had just begun. Comment your thoughts below if you think respect costs nothing. Subscribe for the full story, because what happens next will change everything. Ava Miller stood near the kitchen doorway, her hands shaking. As she wiped the spilled wine off her uniform, her eyes red from the sting of humiliation. Daniel Carter's mocking laugh still echoed through the restaurant, the sound cutting deep into her heart. While the guests whispered and pretended not to look, Ethan Rhodess watched quietly from his table, his face calm, but his jaw tight with anger. He had seen many things in his life, but watching a powerful man kick a struggling waitress and laugh about it made his boil. Linda Brooks, the manager, hurried to Ava's side, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Ava, go to the back. Take a break, please, before he complains again." Ava nodded, swallowing her tears, and walked toward the back, her limp visible with each step. Ethan stood up from his seat slowly, his every move deliberate. As the eyes in the room turned to him, he walked over to Daniel's table and smiled politely. "Mr. Carter, right?" Daniel looked up, annoyed. "Yes. And you are Ethan Rhodess, billionaire investor from Horizon Holdings, the same company your firm has been trying to impress." Daniel's smile froze, his arrogance faltering for a second. Ethan leaned slightly forward, his voice calm but sharp. "I just witnessed something disgusting, a man using his power to hurt someone just because he can." Daniel's face turned red as he forced a fake laugh. "It was a joke. She should know how to take one." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Do you think kicking a woman begging for you to stop is a joke?" Daniel's expression darkened. He straightened his jacket and said, "Watch your tone. You may have money, but this is my city." Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then maybe your city needs new owners." His words hung heavy in the silence. The guests exchanged looks, and some even whispered. Finally, someone said something. Linda returned nervously, Ava still behind her, tears in her eyes. Ethan turned to her gently. "Are you all right?" Ava nodded softly. "Yes, sir, I'm fine." Thank you. He looked at Daniel again and said, I think you owe her an apology, Daniel. Scoffed me apologize to a waitress. Ethan smiled faintly. You'll understand why soon. Daniel frowned, confused. Ethan took out his phone and dialed a number. Yes, James, it's Ethan. Cancel the upcoming partnership with Carter Industries. Immediately, the restaurant went dead silent. Daniel froze. What are you doing? You can't be serious. Ethan looked him dead in the eye. I'm very serious. No deal is worth working with someone who treats others like trash. Ava gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Daniel's face turned pale. Linda whispered under her breath, oh my God. Ethan turned to Ava again. You did nothing wrong. Remember that your dignity is worth more than any man's approval. Then he looked around at the quiet guests and said softly to those who watched in silence, sometimes not speaking up makes you part of the problem too. His words hit the room like a storm. Ava smiled, weakly, tears of gratitude falling as she whispered, thank you, sir. Ethan nodded and walked out, his calm presence leaving everyone stunned. Daniel sat speechless, his empire shaking from a single act of justice. If you believe kindness is strength and respect has no color, drop a comment below and hit subscribe for more powerful true-to-life stories like this one. The restaurant was still trembling with whispers long after Ethan Rhodes had left, his powerful words echoing in the minds of everyone present. Ava Miller sat in the break room, her hands trembling as she stared at her torn apron, the humiliation still fresh, but now mixed with disbelief. Someone had actually stood up for her. Daniel Carter's face flashed in her mind, his smirk, his cruel laughter. And then that moment when Ethan cut the deal off, it replayed like a movie. She couldn't stop watching. Linda Brooks walked in quietly, closing the door behind her, her eyes tired but kind. Ava, honey, are you all right? Ava forced a small nod. I'll be fine, ma'am. Thank you for trying. Linda sighed, sitting beside her. I should have stopped him earlier. I just didn't want to lose my job. Ava looked down softly. That's what people like him count on. They think fear keeps us silent. But today someone showed them otherwise. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter stormed out of the restaurant, his pride shattered, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles on the street as reporters swarmed him. Mr. Carter, is it true Ethan Rhodes canceled your billion-dollar contract? He ignored the questions, but his shaking hands betrayed his fury. He pulled out his phone and barked into it, get me the board meeting now. I'll fix this, I always do. But his assistant's voice trembled on the line. So there's been fallout. Investors are withdrawing statements. Online are calling you a racist. Ethan's video is going viral. Daniel froze. Video? What? Video? The assistant hesitated, so one of the guests recorded the whole thing. When you kicked the waitress, it's everywhere. Now Daniel's face turned white, his hand dropping to his side. As the reality of his crumbling reputation sank in another corner of the city, Ethan sat in his quiet office, watching the same video. Millions had already seen the caption read CEO-optimized, black waitress millionaire shuts HIM down. Ethan exhaled, slowly shaking his head. Some people would never learn until the world forced them to. He called his assistant. Tell the press I'm opening a scholarship fund in that girl's name. Ava Miller's name should mean dignity, not pity. Across town, Ava's phone buzzed endlessly with messages. People she didn't even know flooding her with words of support and love. She couldn't stop crying when she saw the trending tag stand with Ava. Linda came running into the room, breathless. Ava, you need to see this. She showed her the news headline, Ethan Rhodes announces $1 million opportunity for Waitress, who faced racism. Ava's hands covered her mouth, her voice breaking. That can't be real. Linda nodded, smiling through tears. It's real, honey, and it's all because you stayed strong. Ethan had released a statement saying her grace under pressure reminded me that true worth isn't in wealth, but in character. As Daniel watched his empire fall in the glare of public outrage, Ethan prepared for something bigger, a movement that had started with one act of courage in a single restaurant. Now Ethan was scheduled interview while Daniel faced calls for resignation. Ava, however, wasn't thinking of revenge or fame. She just whispered to herself, I just wanted respect, not money. Linda smiled at her. And that's exactly why you deserve both. If you believe silence in the face of injustice is still injustice, comment below and hit subscribe for more heart-touching stories that expose the truth and celebrate courage. The morning after the incident, the city awoke to a storm, not of rain, but of outrage. Headlines flooded every screen across the country. CEO abuses black waitress millionaire steps in. Ava Miller's face was everywhere, captured mid-tear, mid-fear, yet glowing with unbroken dignity. She couldn't understand why people cared now after all the quiet nights she had endured, working double shifts, listening to cruel jokes, wiping tables where her worth was questioned. She had never been seen until now. Linda Brooks hugged her tightly before the restaurant reopened. You've become a voice for everyone who's ever been silenced. Ava smiled weakly. I didn't do anything special. I just stood there. Linda looked at her. You stood with dignity. That's everything. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter's empire crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. Board members withdrew confidence, brands severed ties, and investors demanded accountability. His PR team scrambled, but every apology he posted was met with fury hashtags. Like Boycott Carter and #Justice, for Ava dominated the internet. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. But for the first time, no one was calling to praise him. Even his assistant quit, saying, I can't work for someone who treats people like trash. Daniel stared at the empty office that once echoed with power. His reflection in the glass seemed smaller, weaker, haunted by a single word, coward. At the same time, Ethan Rhodes arrived at a press conference, cameras flashing, as he announced the Ava Miller Foundation for Dignity and Equality. The audience erupted in applause. Ethan continued, she asked for respect, not riches. And that's what we must all fight for, a world where no one has to beg for dignity. Reporters cheered, and even the toughest journalists wiped tears. Ava watched from home, trembling, as her name filled the world with meaning. She received thousands of messages from people telling her their stories of humiliation and hope. She whispered, thank you, Mr. Rhodes, but deep down she knew she had earned every bit of it. Days later, the restaurant reopened, now packed with reporters and supporters waiting to see her. Ava walked in wearing her new uniform, head held high as applause echoed through the hall. She smiled nervously, wiping her eyes. Linda whispered, you ready for this? Ava took a deep breath and said for the first time yes. She walked to the table where the nightmare had started and gently placed her hand on it, then turned to the crowd, saying softly, this was where I lost my dignity, but also where I found my voice. People cried, clapping louder than ever. Meanwhile, Daniel watched the broadcast from his home, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He turned off the TV, unable to face what he had become. Later that night, he went to the same restaurant hoping to apologize, but when he arrived the lights were low, and the tables full of laughter and warmth. No one noticed him. He stood there for a moment, then walked out, realizing that power meant nothing without respect. Ava later received a letter from him saying, I'm sorry I didn't see you as human until it was too late. I'll spend the rest of my life changing. That Ava read it quietly, then burned it in the sink, not out of hate, but closure. She looked up and said to herself, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means moving on. She continued her studies funded by the scholarship Ethan gave her, and years later, she opened her own restaurant, hiring people others ignored. Her sign read, respect served daily, and it became a place where no one felt less than another. Worked beside her, smiling proudly, as Ava trained young waiters, saying, always serve with pride, because kindness is the strongest power in the world. Ethan visited once, walking through the door with a smile, I knew you'd build something beautiful. Ava laughed, thank you for believing in me. He shook his head, no, Ava, you taught me to believe in humanity. Daniel Carter faded into obscurity, while Ava's story continued, inspiring millions, reminding the world that one act of cruelty can awaken thousands of hearts to compassion. If this story touched you, comment dignity over power below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate strength, because sometimes the quietest hearts carry the loudest courage.